All right, hey guys, how you doing? I just wanted to do a quick video kind of explaining a breakdown of a common fault people have with their posture and their hips, in particular when it comes to lower back pain and hip tightness. So anterior pelvic tilt, which I'm sure a lot of you heard of. It's where the pelvis is really tilted forward and sitting at that sort of too much of a slopey angle here. Often related to lots of tightness in the lower back, as I said, compression in the hips, and a lot of things like just stretching your hip flexors, strengthening your glutes, even just like strengthening your core. Whilst they're going to give you some relief to the tight hip flexors and fixing that anterior tilt, it's not going to go far enough really to address the root cause of the problem and get you out of that lower back pain long term. I work with a lot of clients who just really struggle to even rotate their pelvises in this plane at all, right? Because we're just so jammed up and so tight in this position. So it's just telling someone to do a hip flexor stretch and hold that for, a couple of minutes a day on each side. They're just going to keep tightening up the next day and the next day, and they're just going to constantly have to keep going back to that hip flexor stretch to kind of find any sort of relief. So I'm going to go through a few series of kind of releases and activations that addresses the body as a bit more of a system rather than just focusing on what's going on here specifically with the hips. And the first thing I want to kind of address is a common misconception before we get to the anterior pelvic tilt. And that is that a lot of people are stuck in a shift forward as well. So a really easy way to kind of understand this. What we kind of look for when we're trying to align someone's position a little bit better is joint stacking. So from like the middle of the heel, so I just like to go from the ankle bone. That's usually a pretty good enough indicator. We put that stick straight up. What a lot of people do is sit their hips a little bit forwards, sort of belly popping out a little bit, and the body weight's a little bit more sitting on the balls of the feet, on the front of the feet. If we're trying to fix a tilt from there, like if I try and sort of posteriorly tilt my tailbone, yes, I can correct some of it, but I'm not going to correct all of it without getting that posterior shift, so my shift back of the hips first. Yeah, so the first thing to look for, and just do it against, like, see a mirror to the side, get someone to look at you, even just take a photo of yourself just standing nice and relaxed is a really good way to kind of assess this first. Draw a straight line down from your ankle, do your hips sit forwards. First thing to do, start to shift those back, and then we can start looking at how we're going to correct that pelvic tilt, but we've got to get it back first, okay? So if you're trying to correct from a forward position, we're just going to keep like pushing in more tightness and more tension in the front of the hip area, and probably create more tension in the lower back as well. So that's the first thing I just wanted to kind of make really clear. Now, I'm going to show you a few different exercises now. I'm just going to kind of follow along with these. You will need like a foam roller or a ball. That's like the ideal piece of equipment to start with. And then everything else can kind of be done with body weight, minimal equipment if you do have it. So the first thing, we're going to do some release work. So we're going to get your roller. I actually left my smaller ball at home, which is annoying. So we're going to use, I just got this bigger ball, but ideally you have a smaller one. The first area we're actually going to release, right? And this is related to anatomy trains, where we talk about how there's different functional lines throughout the body that are all connected. We have something called the deep front line, and I'm just going to kind of cut it a little bit short. It does go from the top to the bottom, but I'm going to cut it from top of the core, coming down through your hip flexors, and then down through your adductors, right? It does carry on lower as well, but for now, we're just going to focus on this like middle section, because this here, modern day lifestyles, we sit down a lot, we're stuck in this position, our feet just kind of hang out when we're like driving a car or something, and a lot of the time, like again, experience with clients I work with, when we're stuck in that anterior pelvic tilt and we can't get out of it, it's because that deep front line is creating so much tension, and as a result, lots of back pain and things like that. So you're going to line your front. The first area we're going to start with is the adductors, okay? So that foam roller is going to kind of go at an angle, and we're just going to work our way up from bottom of the knee up towards the groin area, okay? So I like to just set this up, lying straight on the front, and then just popping the leg out to the side, kind of cocking it out like that. So foam roller at about a 45-degree angle, and then just lie flat down on your chest, and we're just going to roll slowly through that area, okay? We're looking for any like tender spots, and when we find those, we're just going to sit and hang on them. Breathing here, really important. We just want a nice, slow, relaxing breath control, yeah? Deep inhales, deep exhales. Just kind of let that muscle really sink in and relax. If you find yourself starting to tense because it's a little bit too painful, I need you just to relax off
we're not going to get as much good work and release through that muscle if we're tensing too much and relaxing, okay? And not relaxing. Okay, so just gradually move that all the way up. Again, any tight spots, just hang on them. And you want to be doing about 2 minutes at a time. We can play around with some like different angles here. I'm not going to go for the full 2 minutes for the purposes of this video, but just to give you an idea, yeah? And any spots there, one for me, just like right on that angle, I can start feeling quite a bit of good pain, which is what we're looking for, yeah? If you get any referral anywhere, you're gonna have to assess that yourself, right? Sometimes referral can ease off, but sometimes it can be a little bit too much to take for a while. Next, we're gonna bring that up into now our hip flexors. So same position, we're just gonna go right, find that knobbly bit on your hip bone, and we're just gonna sit that roller just below there, okay? Again, same thing, just flat on the chest. We can explore different angles, we can roll around to the side a little bit. And again, just that deep breathing, deep controlled breathing to relax off. I'm not gonna stay there for too long, but you can just kind of pause the video and sit on that hip flexor for a bit. Make sure you do both sides, obviously. And then the next area we're gonna do, which is one that's missed by quite a lot of people, is coming up into your psoas and just releasing like all those deep intricate muscles around in the core. Again, when this chain, you imagine like if I pulled an elastic band from here to here and just pulled that really tight, what it's gonna do is gonna create that kind of feeling. Rib cage flares out, hips dump forward. So where we're releasing, especially in this core section now, is going to really help ease off that tension that you're having in those areas. So again, smaller ball is ideal. We're going to stick this one just to the outside of the core. So kind of like belly button, you go 2 or 3 centimeters across, you've got a part where it just sort of wants to sit a little bit deeper into your core. We're going to lie down on the front, to the sides, and then this is where it gets sucks. I would ideally not have any food just before you've done this, like I have. We're going to deep breathe in nice and deep, and as you exhale, we're going to let that ball really sink deep into our core, okay? Every time you breathe in, you'll just feel it get a little bit deeper, and then relaxing off. Okay, don't really need to move around too much on this one. Find the spot, like it might, if you've got a smaller ball especially, you'll play around with, you know, exactly where that spot is. Should feel like uncomfortable, but not in a, oh, I'm gonna be sick kind of way. Yeah, so if you're hitting any organs or anything like that, then just ease off and let me know in the comments if you're having any issues finding that spot exactly, and we'll just send an extra link to that. Okay, so release is important. It's like getting that massage, but again, it's not that kind of complete solution. The reason I always start with that release is because some people, especially if you sit down a lot, especially if you've got a lot of lower back pain, releasing that deep front line is something that is just so missed, so common to have lots of tension involved. And so like starting there, you might find that you've not got any tightness there, which awesome, like great, don't stick on it. Move straight to the activation stuff that we're gonna work on now. So first area we're gonna teach you is how do we switch on that TVA, that lower core area. Okay, so don't need a weight for this one, but ideally you have something to just anchor yourself on. So I've got this kettlebell here. Just needs to be heavy enough that I'm not going to really easily like yank it off the floor, yeah? So here we're going to practice a lot of breathing. We don't really get taught how to breathe in life. Sounds really stupid, but learning to breathe properly is an amazing way to help create better core engagement, create good pressure through our rib cage, and just be able to hold your body upright in a better position throughout the day for longer, yeah? So instead of just focusing on that six-pack all the time, we're going to teach you how to properly engage your deep core muscles. So with the breathing, what I'm looking to do, big inhales into the top of the rib cage. And then as I exhale, I want you to think just between your hip bones, you're like closing a book over that area as you exhale, yeah? And you're just gonna breathe all that air right out, as far as you can. A couple of those breaths, just making sure each time you breathe in, as much as you can, we only breathe in up here. So I like to describe, imagine you've got like imagine your whole body's like a water bag, right? And I'm squeezing that water bag at the bottom, and it's pushing all that pressure up into the top and expanding that rib cage, yeah? That's what you're trying to create in that core exercise. Into the start, is like a corset feeling around the core here, starting to pull in nice and tight. Okay, this is gonna take a bit of work, and it's gonna be really hard for a lot of people at the start to really open the rib cage with the breathing. So just take your time with this and just get it the best you can, okay? What I don't want you to do in this position is push your lower back into the ground. If you do that, you're just using those back extensors, and it's actually going to probably put pressure and tension into your lower back. We've got to create that pressure from the floor, yeah? Once we get that right, and again, it might not happen today, but over time, we're not going to have a gap below the floor between the floor and our lower back, okay? So once we've got that nice and set, we're going to use this weight just as a bit of an anchor. So I'm trying to pull it off the floor, and I'm using that to sort of start crunching the upper abdominals in a little bit, and just get it as flat as we can through the bottom of that rib cage. Breathing stays the same. And then from here, nice and slow, imagine you've got 20 kilos strapped to your ankle, so that lower core is already firing. And we're going to just lift the knee and foot off the ground, and then we're going to slowly lower it again. Yeah, I'm trying to make sure I focus that, controlling that tension through my lower abdominals. Pulling on that weight to create a little bit of extra tension. Breathing up into that rib cage the whole time. 1, 2. Yeah, it's not about how many reps you do. It's not about how much time you go for. It's about getting good engagement in that right area through that lower transverse abdominal. With all these exercises, yeah, quality over quantity every single time, okay? You're not gonna be able to feel the right thing if you're just sort of rushing through the reps with these ones. So I'd rather you do like 4 or 5 reps that are super slow, super controlled. So you're gonna get way better time and attention, you're gonna get way better engagement, and then we can start building that up in some more dynamic movements. Okay, so the next variation I'm gonna kind of add to that, just building on this, is same position. If you're finding that a little bit easy, we're gonna bring one, same setup on that core, so I'm sucked in on that lower core. We're gonna bring both legs up. Again, I'm sucking in that lower abdominal. I'm keeping a little bit crunched to the top of that core. I'm bracing myself on this weight. And then one leg at a time is gonna go slowly down and all the way up. I don't know if you can see that clearly on the camera, but I'm starting to get some of those shakes. We like to chase the shakes. It's that nervous system reaction. Yeah, and that's where the changes are gonna start happening in the body. Boom. Yeah. Learn to create better engagement and better tension throughout your body so that you can keep that going longer term. Okay, next exercise we're going to look at. Now I notice if we don't do any stretching or don't want to just rely on stretching, I'm going to show you a little bit of a stretch variation that's going to help you actually get some tension and work through there. Now, as I said, a lot of people really struggle to even move their hips forward and back. So that release work and that core control is like a starter to unlocking that. And then we're going to do a little hip flexor stretch variation here that's going to help us start getting some better movement through our hips in that rotational plane, yeah? So if you need a prop stick to hold, then that's absolutely fine. I was just kind of using this as a guide. We want to set up, firstly, joint stacking, okay? So my shoulders, hips, and knee, trying to sit in a nice straight line. And then we're looking at the angle of that pelvis, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I'm not in that shifted forward position. So we get that stacking, and then we go into that posterior pelvic rotation, okay? So I just call this like tucking the tailbone, nice and flat. Imagine your tailbone, you're trying to pull that down to the floor. You get that right, already start feeling quite a lot of tension and open up through this quad. The way we make this stretch from a passive stretch to a bit more of an active stretch and actually relevant to the way our body moves is by creating that core tension. So first of all, suck in, big inhale, up to the top of the rib cage, and then a nice big suck in on that lower core, okay? And we're already starting to feel a lot more through that hip flexor on the right side. And then with that front leg, I'm gonna create a little bit of extra tension through the muscles here. So our muscles need tension to hold ourselves up. What I'm doing with this front leg is starting to drag it back into the floor. And with this hip, top of the quad, I'm almost trying to push it up to the ceiling. Yeah, starting to maybe feel a little bit through this hamstring at the same time. And then if we want to just take it up a little notch, we just get a little bit of rotation through that upper body. That's just going to create a little bit more length through here. I like to take it both ways. 1 and 2. Just get that spine moving. Just one little thing, toe up on the back, ideally if you can. If it's a little bit too much, then just you can go flat foot, but you want to try and build up to this position. The reason why is just being able to get up and move, just more relevant to the way your body actually moves when you walk, okay? So again, repeat that on both sides. I'll show in kind of future videos and exercises how you can start adding a little bit more movement and dynamicness to that hip flexor stretch. Start connecting the fascia and stuff like that through the tissues. But that one for now,
Really good way to open up, but also still creating that tension through and working the muscle as well. Okay, now we're going to look at that posterior chain, but again, looking at what's happening with the rest of the body as well. So lying on your backs again. We're going to look at a modified glute bridge. Now, I like to start with this one because kind of a lot of people, again, don't have that ability to physically tuck their tailbone, right? So because they're so jammed up. And sometimes it's just an awareness thing, which is what this drill is going to start to teach. Okay, so everyone, you're probably very familiar with a glute bridge, which is taught a lot to try and engage those glutes. The reason I'm not a massive fan of this glute bridge is because, especially if you're already stuck in an anterior shift, what are we teaching the body to do? We're teaching the hips to like shift forward, especially if we go too far up and we start loading up tension into this lower back. Yeah, there's quite a few things that can go wrong here, and it's not actually teaching us properly that pelvis rotation, yeah, that pelvic tuck to get ourselves out of the anterior tilt. So with this, I like to go same breathing. So we're going to get that core nice and set first. Big exhale, lower core, start switching on nice and tight. Now what I'm doing with my heels is going to start pulling them back towards my butt a little bit. Yeah, that's already starting to create some tension in the back line. And then all I'm allowed to do here is tuck the tailbone to pull my hips slightly off the ground, okay? What you'll notice is my hips aren't driving up to the ceiling. From there, hold, and then back down. Yeah, so you want to almost feel like your spine, the base of your spine is just peeling slightly up off the ground and then folding back down again. You should feel lots of engagement through your glutes in that position. So there, core in, tailbones tuck in, give your glutes a little bit of a feel if you want to check them, and then slowly let them peel onto the floor again. Yeah, it looks like a really small movement. Again, if you're really connecting that core properly, the floor obviously helps me keep a good position with my spine. That's relevant to the way I stand. And then we can start really loading up those glutes. Two little variations. Firstly, it's a single leg. So I can do exactly the same thing, just loading up on one side. It's going to start making it a little bit harder. And down. And then the other little variation, can't show you here, but rest your legs on a box or a seat or something, about yay high. And then just do exactly the same thing. And you're just going to get a little bit more elevation through to really activate that posterior chain, primarily starting to feel some tension in your glutes, yeah? So that's just teaching you the fundamentals of how does our pelvis properly rotate this way. If you can't do that yet, you need to really learn and unlock everything going on around there so that you can start restoring your anterior pelvic tilt. Last exercise, and this is the killer one, this is the one that's going to make the big difference, okay? So we need to nail those things first, but once you do understand those exercises before, this last exercise is the one that you want to be doing, you know, like 80, 90% of the time to really fix that anterior pelvic tilt, okay? So we're going to set up in a split stance. So from a front view, we're here. So I'm just in like a nice walking stance. And I'll do it from a side view, like so. Okay, so I'm going to just demo in the side view, just so you can see nice and clearly. We want the joint stacking again, so I want that hip to be stacked over the heel. My weight's on the heel. I want to make sure that I'm not dumped forwards into that lower back. So our starting position is nice square hips, nice open rib cage, nice drawn in belly on that TVA, okay? 80% of my weight on that front leg. Now all we're thinking here is like a kind of deadlift hip hinge movement, but I'm loaded up on that front leg. So bum starts going back, and we're going to think like, imagine you've got an elastic band wrapped around your butt, and you're trying to stretch that nice and long as you go back. Now what hopefully you notice is that there's a slight curve in the lower back, and then that's continuing all the way up the spine the best as possible. Like, it's not going to be perfect, and I'm sure mine's not perfect, but we're working on that. Core's always engaged. What you should hopefully feel is a lot of tension in that glute. If you're not getting it yet, you're going to let your hips kind of twist a bit to the right. So turn your zipper slightly towards your front leg, and then as in, you're just going to squeeze the floor together slightly. That's going to help you create a little bit more tension through that glute. You might start feeling a little bit down into the hamstring, but we want to be really focusing that attention on the glute, okay? Keeping the core in nice and tight. Once you start feeling a bit of tension there, I want you to really just seek out more of it, right? What I mean by that is almost like I'm not trying to move, but I'm trying to push a little bit more effort back into that glute. And you're going to see that leg start to get some good work, and hopefully you're feeling it as well, yeah?
Now use that tension to stand yourself up. All the way up nice and tall, really slow, making sure my hip doesn't dump forward into that anterior shift position. Yeah, core's engaged the whole time. And we're up tall into that standing. Okay, 2 or 3 reps of those should be enough to start getting some really good engagement through there. But obviously very slow, very controlled. Now one little extra thing I want you to look at and take note of is as I'm bending over, I'm letting my hips go into a very slight anterior tilt, okay? That's the position that the spine wants to behave. And then as I stand, I'm now tucking that tailbone, yes? I'm going into that posterior pelvic tilt, and that's what's gonna help really get good engagement through that glute. Yeah, 2 reps there, that took, maybe like 90 seconds. Glute is already absolutely firing, okay? So I'm gonna do another, just 1 rep from the front, just so you can kind of see that front view and a couple of things that we're gonna check positionally from a front view. So we're up tall, core's engaged, weights on the front heel, bum's pushing back. See, I can like wiggle my toes, but I'm gonna keep those toes nice and flat on the floor. Thinking, stretch that elastic band around the butt as you go back. Now a couple of things to note here. Firstly, just that knee position on the front leg. I don't want it to go too far out. I don't want it to go too far in. We're gonna keep alignment of that hip and knee the best we can, okay? So just have a little look down and just look at your kneecap and try and get it pointing forward the best you can. And then the other thing which is really common here is the hip hike, okay? So we're not just gonna pull this hip up, we're gonna use the glute on that left side and we're gonna shove that hip up and over to try and get those hips as level as we can. Okay, again, nice and loaded on that front glute, and then use that tuck of the tailbone and the squeeze of the floor together to pull yourself all the way back up to. Good. So again, just going to reinforce that position or that cue in terms of quality over quantity. Yeah, it's not about how many reps you can do with these kind of exercises. It's about how well you can realign things, how well you can kind of seek out those really tough positions where your body starts to, shake and get that nervous system kicking in, and that's where you're going to create those good changes. There's a lot of other things going on with the upper back and the rib cage and everything like that we can definitely work on and integrate, and that's where I talk about, addressing the body and the dysfunctions as a complete system and not just an isolated feature. But we need to just start taking it more than, just hip flexor stretch and just glute strength. There's a lot more going on up and down the chain to really work on. So yeah, thanks for watching. Any comments, any questions, feel free to drop a note or get in touch and I'll be happy to help out. Nice one.